Okay, everyone. Good evening. Thank you to everyone that's tuning in around the world, both on Zoomed In Festival, welcome, and to the Dezeen Virtual Design Festival as well. Thank you very much for tuning in. It's been fantastic for us to see, it's blown us away how many people have been tuning in, and we've been having, close to 4,000 on a lot of the events, loads of comments from all over the world. So please, final event today. We're on all week, keep those coming. And yeah, it's great to see so many people. So thanks very much for joining. Zoomed In Festival. By the way, I'm Luke O'Donovan, the festival director. It's a thing we set up just in the last couple of weeks. We've really thrown it together, but we've got so many great names behind it. And that's in no small part down to Dennis Gilbert, our guest curator for the day from View Pictures.
And thank you everybody for tuning in. From me, I would just like to say, in terms of filmmaking, for the theme tonight, it's a great honor for me to be showing something with Jim Stevenson, who's a veteran, a very young man, but a veteran of films. I mean, he's done something like 100 films. So I'm in awe of that. I've done about 3, I think. So we should show his last, but you drink the best wine last. But he's going to show his film first, and so I'll introduce him and he can introduce the film. Okay, Jim.
Thank you, Dennis. Thanks for the nice words as well. It's a bit odd for me, this festival this week, that I've been doing architectural photography and films for about 10 years. And I think 10 years ago, if you told me that I'd be sharing space with you, Dennis, today, and with Hélène Benet on Thursday, with the bit I'm doing for that, I wouldn't have believed it. So it's really nice to be here, and thank you very much for inviting us to do this. And thank you, Luke, for all of your work, really hard work that you've put in over the last couple of weeks to bring this together, and to Dezeen as well for partnering on this. Should I go ahead and introduce the film, Luke?
Yeah, well, actually, maybe for because we've got a few international viewers, for people that aren't familiar with you. So I think most people who regularly read architecture publications, they know Jim Stevenson, or at least Click Click Jim. We've all seen your images before, but just tell us a little bit about yourself and the work you do, and where you're coming from today for guys who don't know who you are already.
Well, my name's Jim Stevenson. I'm based in Brighton in the UK. Interestingly, I was just chatting with Dennis that I was born in the same part of the world that he's now living in, but I live in Brighton, and I trained as an architectural technologist. As we've learned from the talks earlier today, most architectural photographers seem to come from an architectural background. I left the world of design about just under 10 years ago, about 10 years ago, and started working as an architectural photographer. And about 4 or 5 years ago, I started doing architectural films as well, working with a guy called Ed Bishop, whose background is in advertising films and feature films and music videos.
And we've got Ed Bishop showing some stuff tomorrow as well, so make sure you tune into that.
Yeah, he'll be showing stuff with Mass Collective. So we've been chatting about that today. So my work really focuses on people and interaction of space by humans. And it's really interesting listening to Inigo's talk earlier today, because he has a similar way of working. But today, or this evening, I'm going to show you a film that was commissioned by the Architects Journal, which is a UK architecture publication. They commissioned me to make a lot of films, and this is a film about a home designed by Peter Zumthor with Mole Architects as the executive architects, the kind of architects on the ground, making sure it got built. I, like a lot of buildings, hadn't been there before I got the commission. I was very excited to do it because I'm a fan of Zumthor's work. And I arrived having only really seen a few really good photographs by Jack Hobhouse, which was enough to sort of give me a bit of a taste. But I've been to Zumthor buildings before, so I'm aware of how good he is at building atmosphere and a sense of arrival and a sense of calm in his spaces. So I knew there'd be something extra to discover on top of the photographs that I'd seen. And we really weren't disappointed. I arrived in the evening, this was about autumn last year, for a recce, and this huge wave of mist rolled in almost as I was arriving at the building, and that really set the tone for the film, coupled with the fact that I interviewed Ian Bramwell, who's the director at Mole, who was in charge of the project on site, and he spoke quite poetically about the weather systems and the atmosphere of the surroundings. I don't want to give too much away, so maybe we should play the video.
Absolutely, let's get started. So, yeah, we've been very blessed today. The internet gods have been on our sides. This is a bit where it may get a little bit tricky, so bear with us. If there are any problems on the video, if you look in the link in the description, both on the Dezeen channel and on our channel as well, there are Vimeo links on there for you to watch the video kind of normally, properly, but we're going to give it a go streaming it over here. And then to all of you watching at home, make sure any questions, any comments you got for Dennis and Jim. It's not often you get these guys in the same room going out to the world like this. So yeah, I'm sure they'd love to hear from you, and I'll be putting most questions to them. So I am going to try and share through my screen this film, and yeah, enjoy. And Jim and Dennis, if you could just turn off your video and microphone for this, and then we'll be back in conversation afterwards.
You can see the whole weather systems come in and leave. The wind is exceptional here. Not that you would know it sitting inside the building. I think you witness it with the grass blowing, and you can see from the shape of the trees outside how they've been beaten by the wind. But inside it always remains calm. It's a building, although a lot of it's glass, when the weather comes in, it draws a curtain around the building, and you see the trees and the shadows of the trees, but you're not aware of any of the long views. You're kind of cosseted by it. And it is so calm. It is a retreat that remains so connected with its environment. This is a building that really hides its complexity well and wears it very lightly. The concrete is alive, a real massive building material, but there's so much variation, partly through experimentation and going through lots of different trial and error and crafting of the mix of the concrete. Peter and the team arrived at a concrete that's very, very warm in hue, and then when you put that into the construction method, which is this rammed concrete, which is built up in strata, you get this variation and this stone-like monolithic warmth to the building that's at one kind of large and solid and heavy, but then you see the aggregate and the fineness of individual pieces of concrete. Every one of the sort of 200 square meters of stone floor is a different shape and size. Peter's team drew it out carefully. There were many iterations backwards and forwards between the client and Peter and his team. And then as you stay a bit longer, I mean, of course, I know the building really well and I know the details, but you see more and more details which reveal themselves to you. Everything was hard fought. Every detail, to make it look simple, has so many decisions, discussions, engineering solutions sitting behind it that you'd never know sitting here as somebody who wasn't involved in it. And then of course there's the craftsmen who come to make it, and the craftsmen that did that, it is effortless. You need to spend time here to appreciate the fact that its simplicity is really complicated. And the density of this building, I think, lends it a peacefulness.
Okay. Well, yeah, thanks very much to Jim for sharing that. So now, Jim and Dennis, are you both back online?
Yes.
I'm here.
Brilliant. Okay. So Dennis, while I bring up the file, would you like to introduce the work that you're going to be showing to us today? So there's a bit of a story behind this one, isn't there?
There is a bit, yeah. Well, first of all, it was beautiful. It was lovely.
Oh, thank you.
The weather is just amazing. I don't know how you filmed that. We can talk about that later. But yes, I have some very favorite clients, Walters and Cohen, who are two women who were from South Africa, like I was, and they've been in practice for 25 years now. And they wanted to do a 4-minute film of their work. And they invited some of us to do this. And I don't have a lot of experience in making films, but I had made a couple for an architect in Ireland. And I'd been working for them for 25 years, so I knew their buildings very well. I'd done all their stills on their buildings. And so I was quite keen to get the job, but then on the other hand, I was not so keen to get the job because I knew it was going to be quite a mission. And it was in October, and it was a question of shooting during November, December for a party in early February. So it was quite tight. We had about 25 projects to cover, and we ended up doing 19 buildings. So the film is really a collage of 19 buildings into 6 minutes. They said originally 4 minutes, but I just couldn't quite pull that off. But I've always felt that architectural films that I've seen in the past have always lacked a little bit of the kind of intensity of an architectural photograph. And I've always thought that there must be some way of bringing across the visual side of a photograph into a film. And so that's what I was aiming for. I didn't have too much equipment, although my neighbor offered, he's an old guy with lots of gear, and he offered me all kinds of sliders and things, but I decided not to do any of that. And the revelation was the sound was just to add sound to a picture. Just it's kind of magic, really. And so we can run the film now, and you see what you think. But
yeah, let's run that. And yeah, before you steal all my questions, Dennis. And so yeah, I will share the screen, and yeah, if we can all do mics and video off again, and yeah, playing Dennis's film. Enjoy, everyone.
So you need a bit of blue to Okay, a tiny bit of red and a tiny bit of lemony yellow, and see what you get.
How did you do that? Oh my god,
We have been astounded by the creativity of Walters and Cohen in being able to get so much light into different parts of the building. We wanted a library to be the contemplative heart of our school, so we wanted a very special place. It's north facing, it overlooks the river, and it is one of our most heavily used spaces.
Like, I'm married to one and I had to raise one. She's like, do you know how
Bear with me.
She's such a nut. Such a nut. What line is it about?
And we together delivered what I think is one of the most remarkable educational buildings. Getting good design does not need to cost a fortune. In fact, the cost per square metre was lower than the government were paying for the development of state schools at the time.
Here in Canterbury, in such a medieval context, it is completely different. And before you can get to planning, there are so many different hoops and stages. So you look at Kingsdown House that they did, handmade tiles with, within that whole context, very skillful.
If you imagine a bear standing on all fours, it's not that scary. As soon as it rises up, it's about 6, 7, maybe 8 feet tall. Question 11. So, what did the bear think about humans? James.
He tried to avoid them, and he just wanted humans to go away.
Good. So he didn't really want a friend in the end, did he? Good. And question.
Oh no, okay.
I like the shape of the rock. I never realised before that rocks could look like that.
Squeeze. Squeeze. Help her.
This building is loved by its community. People come and visit it all the time. Parents can't believe that their children are being educated in this building. When we have parents come in and hear the children doing their music or their drama productions or the artwork that we do when we have exhibitions, they're just blown away.
Okay, perfect. That's all you need.
Fantastic. Well, yeah, Dennis, thank you very much for sharing that with us. Yeah, really great to see it, and I hope all of you at home enjoyed that. So yeah, we're getting a couple of questions in on the YouTube, so I'll just keep up with those. But just one question I had. So Dennis, you said that you were maybe slightly apprehensive about a job of this scale because it was a bit of a mission. Is there any such thing as an easy job? Is there, both of you, is there a film shoot where everything kind of goes in your favor? Or are you always working with that, you know, that improvisation and working out as you go along to some extent?
Well, for me, it was just a big pressure to do it in the first place, really. It was, I had to teach myself editing and sound recording and sound cutting and all that stuff. So I was just pleased to be able to get it done in time for the party, which I did. And we shot a couple of things after the party and added them to the film. So, you know, it was a good story in the end for me. But yeah, no, I think I'm sure there's no easy project at all. But this one was particularly daunting for me. That's the point.
And I like the idea, building on that maybe something you don't get so much of images is that the film takes on a life of its own afterwards. So you can go back and do re-edits. You know, it's not that's your film and that's that, where maybe it is with an image sometimes. It's something that's live and evolving. So we got a few questions coming in. So thanks everyone that's tuning in. So Peter Mollick Photography is asking, I'm curious to know how each approaches composition differently between shooting motion and stills and how they might inform each other. So yeah, I guess that, you know, we think of it, we're using a camera is somewhat the same, but actually the way you watch a video is very different to the way where, you know, you look at a print for one still image for a minute. You know, video is changing, you've got to factor in movement, you've got to factor in sound. So I guess maybe I'll start with you, Jim, first, because you've done quite a lot of you know, media. You know, so we work within both of those media. So in answer to that question, yeah, what's your different approaches between moving and still image?
It's an interesting question, isn't it? Because essentially, for the bulk of my work, I'm using the same camera for both instances. So the films that I make are mixing locked off shots, which is when the camera is on a tripod and the camera doesn't move. The only thing that moves is the frame in front of you, people moving past, vehicles, or the light, or the wind blowing in the trees or something. And that's a kind of, they're moving photographs, essentially. That's the locked off shot. So in that sense, I'm composing them exactly as I would a photograph, because in the way that I work with photographs is that I frame my composition according to what isn't going to move, which for the most part is the architecture, and then I wait for all the other variables to be in exactly the right place before I take the picture. So the video for a locked off shot is the same. The way that it changes is when I start moving the camera. I don't tend to move the camera a lot, and if I am, it's motivated movement. The camera's moving for a reason. It's not just moving because I can pick it up and move it around. And I don't tend to do sort of walkthroughs where I, you know, have a steady cam and I walk through the whole building. I tend to move quite slowly with the camera on a track or something. And that, in that way, that's where it differs from doing stills, because when you move a camera, what you get is all of the planes of the building that you see in front of you start to slip over each other. So you start to get a sense of the depth. So the way that I move the camera is really to add depth and sometimes to reveal something. Sometimes the camera moves from you know, a door frame out of the door frame to reveal the entire room or something like that. So that's where it starts to change. I think the important thing about film, though, is, or the important thing for photographers when they transition into film, like I have, is when you're doing a photograph, the only thing you're concerned about is what is in the frame. The photograph is what is in the frame. Whereas with a film, you've got your frame and then you've got everything outside it, which is making all of this noise and this sound that you have to be aware of as well. So you're sort of, you can't spend quite as much time in the camera as you do as a photographer. When you're doing film, you have to step back and be a little bit more aware of what's around you. So the initial stages, the briefing and the research is the same as photography for me, but the shooting differs here and there slightly. And obviously when I use a drone, that's very different as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So would you maybe indulge a couple of you know, photo nerd questions about what kind of gear you're using?
Yeah, okay. One day I'll be able to do it all on my phone and that'll be a happy day. But for now, I'm using a Nikon D850, which shoots 4K footage. I use the same tilt shift lenses that I use for stills, so a 24mm and a 45mm tilt shift lens. For my sound, I use a Zoom H4 and a lav mic, which is a clip-on mic that you see newsreaders wearing for interviews. And for ambient sound, I use a series of different microphones, use a shotgun mic, which is good for picking up directional sound, binaural mics for surround sound and things like that. And then in terms of movement, I have a Rhino track, which is only about, I think it's about it's about 1.5 meters long. So it's got a motor on it that I can control. So it gives a really slow, smooth movement to the camera across the track. I have a Steadicam, which I sometimes use if it's a really busy building, you know, if I'm working on like a school playground or something, I might use the Steadicam to walk around. But generally speaking, I'm keeping the camera on a tripod.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. And lighting wise, is it ambient lighting you're using, or
yeah, always.
Yeah.
As with my stills, everything I do, I can't remember the last time. Sometimes for interviews, I might use a light as a fill-in, because I film if I'm interviewing someone, I'm filming it as if I'm shooting their portrait. But for any architectural shots, it's always natural light for me all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, yeah, I mean, if you go back a few years, when I was first getting into my own kind of architectural photography career, and you know, starting out and looking at guys like yourself for references, I was always wondering what, if you like, the secret sauce was with the lighting and so on. But it's really just about patience more than anything, isn't it? And working with the elements.
Absolutely. And with that Zumta film we just watched, sometimes you get really lucky with the elements. But yeah, I'm sure Dennis would say the same. It's about patience and just having the patience to wait for things to be in the right place.
And Dennis, we got a question relating to your project. So you were filming projects that you've previously photographed. Were you using those photographs as references ahead of your shots, or were you discarding that way of thinking and approaching it a completely different way?
Well, I did know where the good views were from the stills, sure, but nevertheless, when you get there, you can still find new angles and new positions. Yeah.
Dennis, do you mind if I just ask a quick question, Luke?
Yeah, please.
As I was watching the film, Dennis, I want to talk about the sound later, because the sound is so well done in that film. I love it. But I really liked, you've got the shots that are architectural shots that I can see the influences of the photographs that you've previously done. But there's some really lovely shots that aren't so architectural. Like there's a shot in a playground with a bunch of kids all getting in front of the camera and stuff. Was that kind of a natural progression for you to start to include those kind of images? Or was there a friction initially?
Well, that was just the kids. I mean, they would do that anyway. And I just let them do it. You know, it wasn't set up or anything like that. And funnily enough, that school was just amazing, because I went back, I shot the school 4 years ago, and it's in Glasgow, and it's a primary school, and the kids are just amazing. And some of them came up to me and said, "We actually remember you 4 years ago. You came here and took some pictures of us." I thought that was pretty incredible. but when I saw that particular shot, it was just so heartwarming, because the sort of main kid who was organizing the group was, he sort of included everybody and he made sure everybody was in the shot. And so I thought, we have to use this one. So, you know, I had some more, I had it set up for a view of the playground and the building on the side and the ambience and everything. And then these guys came right into the frame and they just did that, you know, so I just wanted to use it. And the architects were happy with that. I mean, I should say in this film, the architects were incredibly picky about what shots I used and which I didn't use. And so they were like a great client, you know, for a building. They got so much out of this film that I wouldn't have delivered unless they had been so picky about what they wanted and what they didn't want. So,
how many edits did you have to do, Dennis? Do you have a big cloud folder somewhere of about 17 different versions?
Exactly, huge amounts of edits and things and alterations, and you know, could I get that sound up? And somebody thought that there was some sort of racist comment in some kids in one of the schools I did, and so I took that out, put in some music, and then the architect who was in charge of that school said, no, but I really liked that the fact that there was a state school and the kids sounded intelligent or something. Okay, well, I put the sound back, and actually it was really nice. It was one where the kids are saying, is this going on YouTube or something? And it was great.
Yeah, I think everyone who's ever shot with a tripod is used to, you know, every time we go out, yeah, what are you filming? Is this on YouTube? And whatever. So, but yeah, I think what's great about both of your work is very much it's not just your visual vision, if you like. It's a collaborative piece with the people involved in the spaces. So I saw Dennis, in your film, you had the workshop with Reza as well, and all those things which are taking place in the building are part of the story, which comes across maybe more strongly in the video than it does in your photography work. We've had another question based off that directed towards Jim. So with the interview you did for the project, did that inform the shots you did, or did the shots you do inform the interview, or is it kind of organic and fell into place? How does that thought process work?
It's a really good question, actually. Usually with a film, I like to do the interview first, ideally like a couple of days before, because it really should inform, you know, with a film like that anyway, where there's a spoken narrative, it really should be informing the shots that I do. In that case, we had quite a limited time at the building. So I did and because it's a smaller building, the interview did inform the shots, but I was getting the shots anyway. So with a smaller building, and when you spend a day there, you're covering quite a lot of ground, you're getting quite a lot of footage. So there's a bit more leeway with editing to the interview, because you know you've got enough footage to cover most of the things that are going to come up in the interview. With a larger building, for instance, when I shot the Tate extension that Herzog de Meuron did, that was much more led by the interview, because it's a much bigger building. Takes a lot longer to get around, and I couldn't possibly have shot everything. So we focused it down a little bit. But with the interview with Ian from Mole about the secular retreat, it was great because because we were experiencing quite bizarre weather when we were there. He spoke quite poetically about the weather systems, and he was there with his family. He was there for a few days, and it was incredibly windy. And then one minute the clouds would break and you get this sunshine, and then the rain would come, and we had 4 seasons in a day. So he naturally talked about that quite a lot, and naturally my footage was able to depict that. But it was really good because I think sometimes when you interview people, there's a tendency, particularly with architects, for them to speak quite didactically, quite sort of about process and you know, quite technically about their buildings, which is there's space for that, and architecture is a very technical profession, but it doesn't tend to appeal to a broader audience. So it's really good to speak with an architect who could speak a bit more poetically, rather than about how the building was built, but more about what it's like to be there.
I think that's a good question, which I know you're going to be considering right from, you know, the day you get the email in your inbox saying we want to shoot this. Is who is the audience of these kind of things? Is it an informative, technical thing for architects? Is it an entertainment thing? Is it somewhere in the middle? I guess, yeah, Dennis and Jim, you might both have an opinion on this. Who do you shoot these films for?
Who wants to go first on that?
You go, Jim.
Okay. I mean, obviously, I'm commissioned. Most of my work is commissioned by the architects or by a publication, mostly the Architects Journal. So it sort of depends on who's commissioning it a little bit. But I do try to, if say an architect is commissioning me, we have most architects aren't that experienced with working with film because it's relatively recent that it's become accessible to them in terms of cost and logistics. So we have initial meetings and we talk about what they want to get out of the film. And I do try to move them a little bit to a broader audience because there's a tendency to produce a film because they can. We're just doing a film because we can do a film. And we're just putting it out there because there's space for it now. And what happens is we produce this film that we spend a lot of time, a lot of work on, and then it goes out there and then they sort of forget about it. Whereas I try to encourage them to think about the audience and a broader audience than just a very technically minded audience. And from there, we look at platforms that might be able to show that the best. So for instance, I just finished a film with Laura Mark, who's doing the curation of Zoomed In on Thursday, called Practice. And we found the architecture press was fine as an outlet for it, but actually the broader design press gave us a much bigger viewership. And a much more engaged audience, in fact. So I always ask that. That's one of the first questions I ask the architects is, who do you want to engage with this film? Because architects will watch it anyway because they're nosy and they want to know what other architects are up to. But who do you want to engage with it? Do you want the general public to engage with it? And that doesn't mean you need to produce, an episode of Grand Designs or something. You can still maintain a degree of depth to it, but maybe lose some of the more technical language to speak to a different group of people.
Dennis?
Yeah, for me, I'm such a novice at making films, really. I'm not a filmmaker, so I can't really class this as a film, but it was a one-off for a one-off occasion. So I can't really talk much about that,
You can try.
Yeah.
But no, that's fine. I guess it's something we're learning about as we go along, isn't it? Because this, as we've been saying, this whole idea of putting architecture in film is something I think as a architectural culture we're still very much working on. I mean, the possibilities have massively opened up in the last 10 years with everyone using social media all the time, with the video capabilities of DSLRs. And, yeah, go on, Jim.
The history of architecture in film is actually quite a lot deeper than we might imagine. The first, Le Corbusier was one of the first architects to start using film in 1931 when he worked with Pierre Chanel. And then you had people like the Eames were using film, Charles and Ray Eames were using film extensively in the 60s. MVRDV were using it a lot. Diller and Scofidio were using it a lot in New York, experimenting with film a lot in the 80s and the 90s. So there's this incredible depth, but what we had in the sort of 90s and the early 2000s was a dip in it because the production was we had a rise in visualization or photorealistic visualization, and the production values on films became too expensive for most architects. So we had this big dip, and if you look back to the sort of 40s and the 50s, there were local councils and the government all over the world were commissioning architectural films extensively to promote modernism and to promote the rebuilding after the war. So there was this great history of architectural films that slowly sort of tailed off, and it's only really now starting to come back in because it's accessible and because we can afford. I mean, I was a photographer, or I still am a photographer, who went into film, and they used to call that divergence about 8 years ago, but we're fully diverged now. That the systems that we use to make films and the systems that we use to put films out there, like blogs and YouTube, are the same things that we use for photographs. So the history of it's quite strong and quite interesting, but it's nice to see that it's just rising up now a little bit, and a lot more people are looking into it.
Yeah, you were asking a little bit about how I work, and But I basically would set up a still shot and make a video of that little piece, really. But Jim, I was just wondering what you had to say about the sound.
I mean, the sound is everything with film now. I mean, sound is incredibly evocative, and what you really want from a film is to make a connection with the viewer. And sound, we all know if we hear a particular song or if we hear a particular sound that it can take us straight back to a place. So it's really, really important. It's the one thing that film can provide that photographs can't provide, or one of the things. So it's really, really, really important to know how to manage sound really well. And to be honest, the first films that I made I didn't record the ambient sound. I just tried to ignore it because I was treating the film as a photographer. But it's really interesting when you start recording background sound. What I really liked about the film you did for Walters and Cohen, Dennis, was the overlapping of sound. You get the sort of piano playing constantly when the school's on, and then the sound kind of blurs from one edge to the next. And what sound is a really good, whether it be music or just an ambient sort of hubba bubba sort of sound, sounds really good at just keeping the viewer on a journey and keeping them ticking over and just dragging them along the journey a little bit, or not dragging them, gently pulling them along the journey a little bit.
Well, yeah, I was hoping that 6 minutes wasn't too long, because I was told that maybe 3 or 4 minutes is the limit these days. But I found that when I watched that film of mine, I mean, I'm not bragging, but it just somehow does keep you interested, so it keeps you going.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I'm just a bit concerned that people might not quite pick up on the buildings, and we didn't want to put labels on the buildings to say what they were. But,
I think it's implied, isn't it? I think we can kind of give the audience quite a lot of credit that they'll pick that sort of thing up. In the sound in the film that I did is a lot more subtle, because really it's what Ian talks about in the film is the difference between being outside, windy, elements, quite strong wind, rain, quite noisy, and coming inside where it's very calm. So the sound was really important, that so we could transition from a noisy, windy outside to a very, very, very quiet inside. And you could still see things moving outside, but it just made it very subtle. So I think sound's incredibly important. And if anyone's starting to make their own films for the first time, I'd recommend looking into how you're going to do the sound and really thinking about it.
And Jim, do you want to talk a bit more? So you've collaborated with a few different people on sound, and maybe go into a bit more detail about that process, who you're working with and the different kind of ways you might be able to approach that.
Yeah, I worked with, last year I worked quite extensively with a guy called Simon James, who's a sound designer and a musician, and he's a master of recording audio at different levels. So it was really interesting working with him. So for instance, we did a film about London Bridge train station designed by Nicholas Grimshaw Architects. And he was recording the kind of general hubbub, the general sound around you, with holding microphones in the air to record, the passenger flow and the train announcements and things like that. But what he was also doing was using contact microphones, which are microphones that you with tape, you stick them to a surface, and they kind of record. It's a bit like having a stethoscope on your heart. It records the inner workings of you, so you could hear like the rumbling of the trains going past in the structure of the building. And he would use an electromagnetic microphone which recorded the electromagnetic spectrum, which we can't hear, of things like the ticket gates opening and closing. And what all of that stuff did, when you look at his editing process, he's got a layer of the ambient sound, a layer for the interview, and then layers and layers and layers of different contact microphones or electromagnetic microphones and different bits of ambient sound. So it's like looking at an image in Photoshop and having 10 layers on it. He had the same thing with sound, and all of that, it adds like a richness and a depth to the film that you're trying to produce. So I absolutely love, I'm still at that kind of process with sound where it still blows me away when it's done really well.
Yeah. I think that leads us quite nicely now. So I'm aware we've been talking for a while. into our program on day 3, which will be Thursday this week, curated by Laura Mark, who Jim is a close collaborator of you, isn't she?
Yeah.
About sensing architecture. So we've got events on all day. And then throughout the program this week of Zoomed In Festival, we're going to be doing screenings every day. So tomorrow we have Jim and other of your collaborators, Edward Bishop alongside Will Scott, both showing some really interesting architectural films. Then we have, courtesy of Nowness, on 4 p.m. on Laura's Day on Thursday, we have Emil Raphael will be in conversation with myself, showing some really nice stuff that he's shot. And it'd be really quite interesting one to tune into that. Someone coming from more of a cinema background than, you know, the architecture background that yourselves have, and comparing and contrasting both styles. So anyone watching at home, I look forward to hopefully seeing you there. I'd like to welcome to the conversation now. So today has been curated by Dennis of View Pictures. I think he's done a brilliant job, brought in some fantastic photographers. Thanks very much.
Say thank you for everybody who's contributed today. It's been fantastic. Thank you very much, all of you.
Yeah, thank you, Dennis.
You've been amazing.
And that includes as well the people off the camera. So Callum, Marcus, all the team at Dezeen. Far too many people for me to name. You know, our print supporter, our communications partner, Luke Neve. Loads of people have kind of chipped in and helped in this, as well as you guys. So thanks very much. And tomorrow we're continuing the festival with Mass Collective, who are a group of photographers in London, founded by Henry and Francesco, who, yeah, would you like to tell us a bit of what you've got going on tomorrow?
Yeah, thanks very much, Luke, for having us. We're really excited to curate a day at the Zoomed In Festival. Basically, yeah, can I tell you a little bit about Mass first?
Please do, Henry, yeah.
Yeah, so myself, Henry Woyd, and Francesco Russo, the co-founders of our social group, we set up this London-based collective of architectural photographers, as we thought we really wanted a sort of space for photographers to be able to sort of share their personal work and some business advice, and also have a sort of place to meet up socially. So yeah, that's kind of why we set up the group. But we've got a really exciting bunch of talks for you tomorrow that we've been working on, and I'll sort of take us through the morning of the panel. So to kick things off, we've got marketing tools for the architectural photographer, which is starting at 11 a.m. This is basically obviously going to be about the tools a photographer has to promote themselves today with their work. And our panel includes Christian Trampedak, who is he runs Restless Arc, which is the popular Instagram page. We also have Peter Townsend from Found Artists.
You've got to drop some numbers when you say popular Instagram page.
Oh, sorry, yeah, that's a good point. I mean, we're talking 1.5 million followers, so more than most in the industry, I'd say. So yeah, it's going to be really great to have him on board, because he's going to give us a whole angle about Instagram and the social media for those photographers. And then we've got Peter Townsend, who's the director of creative services of Found Artists, who's a big marketing and advertising photography agency based in New York. So it'll be good to hear from his side from the American point of view. Who else? We also have Luke Neve from Neve Agency, who's a PR agency for architects and creatives, and he's sort of going to bring, I suppose, the younger element of the panel, which is going to be great. And then we're moving on to the architectural image, which is at 2 p.m. UK time, and this is basically about how architects and photographers collaborate in the creation of architectural imagery. And we've got a really amazing panel for that one. We have the director of DRMM, Alex Derrick. We also have Amos Goldreich from Amos Goldreich Architecture joining us, and Jack Baker Penford from Hawkins Brown. And then we also have Celeste Bolte from Bowerbird, who's a sort of communications and PR specialist. Yeah, and that's the kind of sort of mid-morning to mid-afternoon, and I think Francesca is going to run us through the second half of the day, because we've got quite a lot packed in. So yeah. I hope that's
yeah. So even just us talking about it is taking quite a while. It's
exactly. I'm sorry that it's so
really big name. So Francesco, hit us quickly with what else is on the day.
Exactly. Sorry.
Yeah. There's a lot to say, but I'll try to be as quick as possible. So hi everyone. First of all, thanks Luke. Thanks Henry. So basically, our afternoon lineup starts with the International Commission, which is a talk with a panel of world-renowned architectural photographers, and we'll be basically talking about what means for us architectural photographers working abroad, and what are the challenges that we face when we cross the border of our home country. And also another interesting topic would be to talk about what are the differences between Europe and America, because we all know that there are a lot of differences between the two parts of the world in terms of style, in terms of business. So we are really looking forward to talk about it. And the panel is really exciting. It's going to include the Danish photographer Adam Mork, the Canadian duo Double Space, Mike Kelly from the United States, and Marcella Spadaro from the London-based duo Naro. So we are really looking forward to this. And this is going to be at 4 p.m. UK time. And after that, at 6, we're going to have filmmakers in architecture featuring some video screenings from Edward Bishop and Will Scott, which are two Mass Collective photographers who also do filmmaking. So they're going to tell us about what are the differences between working as a photographer and a filmmaker in architecture. So another really interesting topic. And to close the day in the evening at 8 p.m. again, London time, we're going to have Mass Showcase, which is going to be a series of personal photographic works from Mass architectural photographers. And we're going to be featuring, there's the screen coming up, yeah.
That's me. So I'm just going to add to that. So we got so much going on tomorrow and then the rest of the week. It's a lot to remember. So have a look at our website, zoomedinfestival.com. It's all on there. We're updating the program throughout the week. We got all the brilliant speakers tomorrow. I think we have some really, really big events there. So please do tune in all week. All of that, and then throughout the week as well, we got loads of stuff on. Then also on our website, if you've been on there already, you might have seen our print sale. So you can see in the corner my emails pinging with orders coming in. But yeah, some of our photographers, including Jem and Dennis here, and Francesco and Henry as well. I'm still updating the website. We've got loads of fantastic images here. We're selling them in aid of the Trussell Trust, which supports food banks around the UK, which is a really important cause to support right now. But it's also a fantastic opportunity for you guys at home to get print from one of your favorite architectural photographers at an absolutely bargain price while supporting a good cause. So yeah, please do check that out. I'm going to be updating it throughout the week. And Jim as well, you're involved with our Instagram open call ahead of Laura's Day. So yeah, at Zoomed In Festival on Instagram, at Zoomed In Fest on Twitter. Got loads of stuff on all week, so please do get involved. And thank you everyone for your support today. Thank you for our partner Dezeen throughout the day for supporting us. Thanks to everyone that's been watching, and yeah, we really hope to see you again soon. Take care. Bye. Okay, we're offline.
Oh, good.
Excellent.
Hi Jim, hi Dennis.
Hey guys, how are you?
Good.
We're good. We feel like we've jumped in on a talk. You know, obviously we have jumped in on talk, but it does feel a bit like very sudden, like, oh dear, we're coming from a different, you guys have been talking for ages and we're just sort of like, oh God, here we go. Got to tell them the whole schedule in one